So in follow-up to the previous video that I did about John MacArthur's health and the fact that he was not preaching recently, I did want to show a clip from yesterday, January 3rd's evening service from Grace Community Church, where they gave some announcements. And this is all I heard that speaks into the issue of MacArthur's health. If you heard anything else or know anything else, you can leave that in the comments if you saw anything else in this evening service. But just make sure that if you do leave comments, it's first-hand information. As I was saying in that video, I'm really not interested in spreading gossip or speculation. I just wanted to get first-hand information. Also, I just want to clarify that he did come back from a leave of rest, and he spoke at the church for a few weeks, actually. And I think he probably would have spoken at least one more week, but I do think he probably had a health issue. But this announcement here gives a little bit more clarification as to why he's resting.
Well, what a great time so far of congregational praise this evening as we gather back together for Sunday nights at Grace, here at Grace Church. We had a great time this morning. I think if you were here with us with Dr. Lawson, he was here, of course, as the professor of preaching at the Master's Seminary and is in town because of the Doctor of Ministry program, which is actually going to start up tomorrow morning at the Master's Seminary. So that was a real treat for us this morning, Steve. Just so you know, the Doctor of Ministry program here is a program where men come from all over the country to study preaching here and with some of the greatest expositors, the most gifted men in the land. They come here. They, of course, is a blessing for Grace Community Church since it gives us another opportunity to hear from these men each Lord's Day that they're here, to hear from this coming Lord's Day from another faithful man who's going to be on our campus, who's training men to learn how to preach from God's Word. And then, of course, by having these men here this week, it gives our pastor continued week of rest and preparation for the upcoming Shepherds Conference. 2021 Shepherds Conference is upon us, where we plan to have, I think, 3,000 plus men here, church leaders who are going to be converging on this campus from all over the world to be here and to be focused on this year's topic, reclaiming true evangelicalism, from our Grace Church pastors and elders and seminary staff. So it's going to be a great, great time.
So Grace Community Church is having guest speakers who are part of their Doctor of Ministry program, where they are training men to be expository preachers. And so they already have pastors in the area, it sounds like, and who are filling the pulpit right now. And so it's possible that John MacArthur wouldn't have been preaching during this stretch anyway. Like I said, I think he probably would have preached another week, but probably had some health issues. But they do have these other preachers around, so they're having them fill in during this time so that John MacArthur can continue to get rest and be ready for the Shepherds Conference that's coming up at the beginning of March. So I know a lot of people will be happy to hear this, that it sounds like John MacArthur is doing better and that he will be ready to come to the Shepherds Conference and be a part of that. But it's always good to keep him and the church in prayer. And I know that people did have reactions to my video yesterday. There was one person who, at least one person who was very critical of Pastor MacArthur because of the stance he's taken during the pandemic. And I figured that there might be some people who would react quickly to what I was talking about yesterday. I do want to say, though, that it's really important to keep in mind that even people like Pastor MacArthur who are trying to really push back against government overreach, it doesn't mean that those people necessarily don't take the pandemic seriously. Even Pastor MacArthur said that there is a greater risk for people who are over 80 years old, which he himself is. So that's important to keep in mind, that just because you think there are dangers with government overreach doesn't mean you don't take the pandemic seriously. However, I do think there's a problem of extreme language on both sides of this issue. So when people downplay the pandemic too much, it can be a problem because it can make it sound like they're not taking it seriously. And of course, there are people who are not taking it seriously. But I really believe there are people who do take it seriously, but sometimes their language conveys that they are not. But then there are people whose language is really the opposite. It's very much kind of fear-mongering language. And the problem with that, like for example last summer when John MacArthur was kind of pushing back, really what was happening is you had a lot of people that were still making a really huge deal out of the pandemic when the numbers were actually doing better, especially in terms of just the spread of the disease throughout the country and the amount of hospitalization. And yet government was still really being restrictive. So what happens there, I think, is what I would call the boy who cried wolf syndrome, that when you make too big of a deal out of something when it is not presently a big deal, then people tend to say, well, what are you making a big deal out of? Why do you keep saying that there's a huge problem here when we don't see it? Now that there is actually a growing problem, it makes that urgency seem less important because of how they spoke even during last summer. So you can see what I'm saying, that extreme language on both sides can cause problems. What I really advocate for is that we speak truthfully and get as much factual information as we can. But as I've said before, there is going to be bias in this situation because of our own experiences. I've had people share anecdotal information in the comments, and it depends on your experience. If you've had someone or you yourself have suffered from COVID-19 seriously, then that's going to affect your perception. If you've had someone or you are someone who's lost their job or their business due to the shutdowns, that's obviously going to affect your perception. So all of it are factors that we have to keep in mind, and certainly it's not an easy situation. Anyway, I just wanted to give this update and share some thoughts with you. I always love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to leave them. I hope that this has been helpful and encouraging on some level, but thank you so much for listening to what I have to say from A Frisch Perspective.